India, democracy or dictatorship? You know, it's a question that feels more intense right now than maybe ever before. But this whole debate, it's not new at all. In fact, what if I told you that one of India's most celebrated freedom fighters actually argued for a dictatorship?
After independence from the British, India should have a dictatorship for at least 20 years because we Indians lack discipline. Yeah, those were the words attributed to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. It's a pretty shocking statement coming from a national hero, right? And it really gets to the very heart of this deep-seated tension in the Indian mindset. And this is not some fringe idea we're talking about. I mean, if you've ever been in a discussion with the urban, educated crowd, this whole thing might sound kind of familiar. The conversation, it starts with something like petrol prices, then it moves to corruption, and it almost always ends with someone saying, you know what we really need? A dictator to just whip everyone into shape. It's a thought millions of people have, but very few actually say out loud. So, what is driving this feeling?
Well, it all boils down to a crisis of faith, a really deep and widespread frustration with the democratic system as we know it today. Plain and simple, people are just tired.
And the reasons for this frustration, they feel deeply familiar, don't they? We're talking about endless corruption scandals, courts where you get adjournment after adjournment, but justice, that's rare. Roads that are built, then they break, then they're rebuilt in this never-ending cycle. And every single election, it feels like it's the same faces, the same promises, and the exact same divisive politics of caste and religion. This frustration has been building for decades, and it leads to one thought. Maybe the problem isn't the players, but the game itself.
And that frustration, well, it actually has a number. According to a Pew Research Center survey, a staggering 85% of Indians expressed the desire for a dictatorship. Yes, you heard that correctly, 85%.
So let's put that 85% number into some perspective. As you can see, that same feeling is held by only 32% of people in the USA and 41% in Japan. This comparison just shows you the sheer scale of the disillusionment here in India. And look, even if that number is a little bit exaggerated, the sentiment on the ground is undeniable. People feel like democracy is putting the brakes on India's progress.
Okay, so let's really dig into this case against democracy. Why does an authoritarian system seem so appealing to so many? Well, the critique has surprisingly deep roots, and it comes from the very person who designed the system.
Way back in a 1953 BBC interview, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the architect of the Indian Constitution, made this absolutely chilling prediction. He warned that India's democracy would exist only in a formal sense. But what on earth did he mean by that?
He basically explained that India would have all the right pieces: elections, a prime minister, a parliament. But just having those structures in place doesn't automatically make a system truly democratic. The machinery might be there, but the spirit, the way it actually functions for the people, would be missing.
Ambedkar illustrated this so brilliantly with this powerful analogy about how we vote. He said that voters don't really care about the quality of the candidate, they just vote for the party's symbol. He was referring to the Congress party's symbol at the time, and he said that if the party told people to vote for a bullock, they would blindly vote for the bullock, without ever checking if a knowledgeable person or, say, a donkey was standing behind it. When loyalty completely trumps merit, the whole purpose of an election just gets watered down.
And we see the results of this formal democracy pretty much everywhere. Back in 2017, the Mumbai-Ahmedabad bullet train was announced, but it's still stuck in land disputes and political fights. Then in 2023, a stricter hit-and-run law was proposed to save lives, but it was put on hold after nationwide trucker protests brought the country's logistics to a total standstill. And just this year, a simple rule for online attendance to make sure teachers in UP actually show up for work was stalled by union protests. In every one of these cases, democratic processes led to total systemic paralysis.
Now, this kind of paralysis is exactly what makes the idea of a decisive, authoritarian leader sound so good. But we have to ask ourselves, what is the true face of the dictatorships that people so often seem to admire?
So on one side, you've got the promise, the shiny cities and high-speed rail of China, the strong, no-nonsense leadership of Russia. But what's the price you pay? In China, it's a social credit system where saying the wrong thing about the leader tanks your score, and that restricts your travel, even your kids' schooling. It's the Great Firewall that blocks Google and YouTube. It's the memory of Tiananmen Square. In Russia, it's critics of the government dying in mysterious falls from windows.
And if you want to see the most extreme example, just look at North Korea. Every single home has to have a portrait of the leader. If an inspector finds even a speck of dust on it, your family can be jailed. The law literally states that if your house catches fire, you must save the portrait before you save your own children. This is not an exaggeration. This is the absurd, brutal reality of absolute control.
So, I have to ask you directly, looking at that reality, is a bullet train really worth this price? Is this the trade-off you're actually willing to make?
Because while our democracy is flawed, and I mean deeply flawed, it offers one thing that a dictatorship can never, ever allow. And that brings us to its enduring, completely non-negotiable value.
That value is the voice of the common citizen. It is the fundamental power to challenge authority, to hold the powerful accountable. You could say it's the only real shield for the powerless.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. Look at what happened with the recent UGC regulations for universities. The ruling party's own core supporters felt the new rules were unfair. They took to social media, they raised their voices, and the government, facing all that pressure from its own base, was forced to roll back the policy. That simply could not happen in a dictatorship. Your voice, when it's combined with others, creates real pressure and forces real accountability.
And here's another incredibly crucial point. After nearly 70 years of rule, the Congress Party was peacefully voted out of power. That was a monumental shift, and it happened without a single drop of blood being shed. In a dictatorship, removing a leader almost always means violence, civil war, and chaos. The peaceful transfer of power is a luxury of democracy that we just too often take for granted.
So, if dictatorship is a terrifying cure and our democracy is sick, what's the answer? Well, the solution isn't to tear the whole system down. It's to fix what's broken.
The source material we're looking at puts it perfectly. The problem isn't the system itself, it's our own complacency. Think about it. The roads are bad, so we buy cars with better suspension. The public schools are failing, so we find a way to send our kids to private schools. The air is polluted, so we buy air purifiers for our homes. We've just learned to adapt to failure instead of demanding success from our government.
So, the path forward really is reform. First, judicial reform. We have to create fast-track systems to clear the backlog of over 40 million cases that are just clogging the courts and stalling progress. Second, governance reform. Major projects need transparent processes and strict, mandatory timelines. And third, and this is the most important one, voter awareness. We have to stop selling our priceless votes for a few hundred rupees or casting them based on caste or religion and start electing people based on actual merit and solid policy.
And let's not forget, the greatest luxury we have today is freedom. It was not a gift, it was earned with the blood of countless martyrs. To even consider trading that away for some illusion of efficient slavery is to completely forget the price that was paid.
And that leaves us with one final question, a question for every single one of us. Is our duty to just give up on a flawed system because we're frustrated, or is it to take up the difficult but necessary work of building a better one? The choice, in a democracy, is still ours to make,